Hello, boys and girls. This is Miss Moreno. Today we're looking at Eureka Math, Module 3, Lesson 4. The topic today, the title, The Opposite of a Number. Learning targets. I understand that each non-zero integer, a, has an opposite denoted negative a, and that negative a and a are opposites if they're on opposite sides of 0. I know that sounds confusing, but on the next slide I'm going to show you what that looks like. And you will recognize that the number 0, it's its own opposite. Like we were talking yesterday, it's not positive or negative, it's neutral. It's its own opposite. I understand that since all counting numbers are positive, it is not necessary to indicate such with a plus sign. So just like we were talking about, if we're talking about a negative number, you put a negative sign, but when it's a positive number, you do not put a plus sign. So here we go. Each non-zero integer has an opposite denoted negative a. Negative a and a are opposites if they're on opposite sides of 0 and the same distance from 0 on the number line. So I'm going to look at negative a and a. Right, we want to show that they're opposites on a number line. And we want to show that by being clear that they're the same distance away from 0, just on the opposite directions. So here's my number line. Here is 0, and I went to the right because to the right is positive numbers. I labeled that a, and then to the left, negative a, and I made sure to move the same number of units, right? I went 4 units to the right and 4 units to the left. So a negative number and a positive, they're opposites if they're the same distance away from 0. Let's look at example 1. Locate the number 8 and its opposite on the number line. So I'm going to locate 8. And I know that's 8 because it's 8 spaces away from 0. Its opposite would be 8 spaces away from 0 in the opposite direction to the left. And that gives you negative 8. And I need to explain how they are related to 0. 8 and negative 8 are located 8 spaces away from 0. That's how they're related. Just one is to the right and one is to the left. So now we're on exercise 2 through 3. Locate and label the opposite of the numbers on the number line. So don't let this trick you. It's locate and label the opposites. So think about it. Let's look at letter A. I have 9. But I need to locate its opposite on the number line. So the opposite of 9 is negative 9. And I'm going to label that A, point A. Let's look at letter B. We have negative 2. But again, I'm labeling the opposite. So the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. So I label that point B. Pause the video. Do the next 2 on your own, and then when you're ready, continue. So now that you pause the video and you tried it on your own, let's look at letter C. So I have positive 4, but I need to locate the opposite of positive 4, which is negative 4, and I label that point C. And then finally, I have point D, negative 7. So the opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. Okay, exercise 3. Write the integer that represents the opposite of each situation. So that's one part. So again, the integer is just the number by itself, right? So don't let this trick you. So we have 100 feet above sea level. The integer I'm working with is 100. Above tells me it's positive. But in this case, it's telling me to label the opposite, write the opposite integer. So the opposite of 100 is negative 100. And so go ahead and pause and do the next 2 on your own. Okay, so let's check your work. So letter B. I have 32 degrees Celsius below 0. Well, I know that my integer is 32. And it's below 0, so that's negative. But I'm writing the integer of the positive. I mean, not the positive, excuse me, the opposite. So the opposite of negative 32 is positive 32. Okay, let's look at letter C. Withdrawal of $25. So when you withdraw, you're pulling out of your bank account, and that shows as a negative. But again, we're writing the opposite. So the opposite of negative 25 is positive 25. And let's go back and see if we answered all the questions. We wrote the integers, right, the opposite. But now we need to explain what 0 means in each situation. So, for example, on letter A, in yesterday's lesson, we learned that 0 represents sea level. Letter B, right, 0 represents 0 degrees Celsius. And for letter C, 0 represents no change. I know that sounds confusing, but withdraw, you have, when you take out, it's negative, right, change. And when you deposit, it's positive, you're adding money. But when there's no change, that's 0. Okay, so let's take a look at a real world example. Maria decides to take a walk along Central Avenue to purchase a book at the bookstore. On her way, she passes a furry friend's pet shop and goes in to look for a new leash for her dog. Furry Friend's pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. She leaves Furry Friend's pet shop and walks towards the bookstore to look at some books. After she leaves the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's pet shop to see if she can find a new leash at a better price. Which location, if any, is the farthest from Maria while she's at the bookstore? So let's break this apart. We know that Furry Friend's pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. And I'm just going to circle west. And I'm going to cheat and look at this compass rose, right? I know that west is located to the left. So I'm actually going to label this W for west, just to help me with my word problem right here. Let's see, what else do we know? She leaves Furry Friend's pet shop and walks towards a bookstore to look at some books. After she leaves the bookstore, she heads east. So now she's heading east, and when we look at the compass rose, it's in the right. So I'm going to label that east. Now we need to answer which location, if any, is farthest from Maria while she is at the bookstore. So the first thing I need to do is find the bookstore, right? Oh, and I need to determine the scale. That's the first thing I need to do. I apologize. So I need to start by finding 0. And I know that I need to label -7 and +7. So my scale here is going to go by 1, because I first need to locate the pet shop to the left, which are negative numbers. So I start with -1, -2, all the way to when I feel that it's to -8. And then I do the same to the right because we keep the same scale. I'm going to increase by 1s. So now I'm taking the information I have here. I know that when she leaves one shop and walks towards a bookstore and then goes to the other, it's 7 spaces away. With the information I have here, I can determine that 0 represents the bookstore. And just for a visual, here's a bookstore. And let's see, Furry Friend's pet shop is 7 blocks west. So if I go 7 spaces to the left, I have Furry Friend's pet shop. So I'm going to label it right there. I put FF for short, for Furry Friend's pet shop. Okay, so let's see what we have. So Maria is walking along Central Avenue to purchase a book at the bookstore. So she's not at the bookstore yet. On her way, she passes the Furry Friend's pet shop. So here she is at the Furry Friend's pet shop. And she goes to look for a leash for her dog. Furry Friend's pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. So we can see that clearly here, that it is 7 spaces to the left right? 7 blocks. And we can also count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the west, to the left. And she leaves Furry Friend's pet shop and walks towards the bookstore to look at some books. So she's leaving and she's heading over to the bookstore. She's looking at books. I'm just following the directions. After she leaves the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's pet shop. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 blocks. And I know that that is Ray's pet shop. So I'm going to label that right here. And again, just to be consistent with the other side, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that is Ray's pet shop. So I'm just going to label that RP for Ray's pet shop. Now we need to answer the question, which location, if any, is the farthest from Maria while she's at the bookstore? So, when Maria is located at the bookstore, we want to know which location is farther away. But we can clearly see that both pet stores are exactly 7 spaces away from the bookstore, and in this case, there's 7 blocks. So when Maria is at the bookstore, both of the shops are equal distance away. And what does 0 represent in this situation? We need to answer that question as well. 0 represents the location of the bookstore. Let me go ahead and write that. 0 represents the location of the bookstore. So I need you to go ahead and finish the rest of the lesson. When you are done, and then the exit ticket submitted, and then I will be checking in with you if you have any questions. Thank you.